Welcome back. You're watching The Agenda. Now, South African history organizations say that it's only over the last 3 or 4 decades that women's roles in the history of South Africa has belatedly been given some recognition. Previously, the history of women's political organization, their struggle for freedom from oppression, for community rights and, importantly, for gender equality was largely ignored in history texts. In South Africa, Women's Month is used as a time to reflect on the failings and successes of women empowerment across all spheres. The SABC revisited the role women play in politics historically and in the current climate. Mandisa Mashego from the Economic Freedom Fighters, from the African National Congress, Anisa, Mazimpaka, and also was in our Seapoint studios, Siviwe, Gwarube from the Democratic Alliance spoke on these matters.
For me, right, personally as a youth, right, I feel that when these policies are tabled, right, like Mandisa saying, we have these beautiful policies. It's all about implementation. And I think that's where the problem is. Because as much as we can talk about policy, we need that implementation part. And then the problem comes...
What's hindering it from where you sit, from your experience?
As a youth, right, as part... Look, you have politicians and decision-making bodies. And somewhere along the line, something somewhere gets stuck. And obviously, it's the people on the ground that get affected. So ours, as the youth, as part of these youth formations in these political spaces, is to keep pushing for accountability, and not just from one party as the ANC, because it's not just the ANC that's governing this country alone.
It must take responsibility.
ANC has majority, but you must remember that there's the EFF, there's the DA, and there's other parties. No, we are not part of your government. No, it's not part of the government.
We ask questions, your people don't account. No, but you can't say that.
But allow her to finish her training.
You have to take, and this is where accountability comes into play. You cannot have parties that form part of a government or that form part of a national structure and that hold seats in parliament say that they're not going to account simply because the ANC holds a majority.
We don't have a minister, we don't have an MEC, we don't have an MMC, we are not
You have members of party.
No, we are opposition, Mami.
Yes, you have,
the difference
but you have a
mandate.
You have a mandate from your people who put you in parliament to be accountable, and this is the accountability that we're running away from. I do understand what multi-party democracy is. Okay, but so you're telling me that you're telling me that you don't account to your people,
okay, so
because mine is for the EFF.
No, you must account for government as the ANC. Which part of that don't you understand?
The ANC does have accountability. Accountable in the Western Cape, and what do you do? Where do you get stuck? As Anisa is saying, that somewhere goes wrong.
Yeah, I think perhaps the conversation that we've been having for the last minute or two is actually one of the places where we get stuck. Somebody mentioned in the discussion that, it's quite important. I mean, if you look back to the struggle of women back in 1956, those women across racial lines, across really from all corners of society, were able to come together so that they can defeat a common cause. The reality is that here's a wild thought that I don't think as South African women we do enough to reach across the aisle to say these are the common things that we share. The idea of safety for women, the idea that, a department for women,
so
children,
practically as a Democratic Alliance,
is just simply that. A department
as a Democratic
is not really
Alliance,
going to change materially the lives of people. So these are the things that we can all agree on. How then do we, across political lines, across racial lines, move in and start changing those things? And so sometimes I think that we can work a little bit in silos and talk about, you're in the ANC and therefore you're in government. I can understand that.
Is there an example that the Democratic Alliance has made that effort, reached across the aisle, and has been turned down on a critical issue by any one of these parties?
No, I mean, there isn't a practical example to say we've been turned down, but I'm saying this is part of the problem. So the idea, for instance, around Tutuzela centers and sensitivities around SAPs and that's where people go and report rape cases. The fact that there are people, the women who still go to SAPs and are basically re-victimized is something that we can all rally around and we can't disagree on. So no, we haven't been able to work together enough as political parties and as women in political parties.
All right, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, more for you.